106 Jack FM, it's the Sunday Roast with Caroline. Now, there's been a lot in the news recently about the rise in electricity and gas supply prices from companies across the board. But if we can't afford to, or we simply don't want to pay these higher prices, then what are our options? Well, my next guest is Andrew Sheldon. He's the managing director of an Oxfordshire company called Energy. They not only supply and install products that can create heat and energy without going through these usual channels, but they've also been working with the government to make these renewable energy options more readily available to consumers and cheaper to install and use. So, Andrew, let's start off then. Tell me a little bit about why you got involved in renewable sources of energy.
Yeah, I started thinking in 2000 about how the UK could deliver a better energy service going forward to the domestic heating marketplace, with the knowledge that fossil fuels were running out. Undoubtedly, were then going to increase in value. Gas in particular, we were beginning then to start looking at how we were going to import gas. That was going to obviously have an effect on consumers' pricing and also an effect on the balance of payments for the UK. And I looked around the world and saw that in Sweden they were using a product called heat pumps, ground source heat pumps, taking all the heat from the ground, absorbed solar thermal energy during the summer period, and bringing it back through a bit of technology, which is actually a refrigerator technology, and delivering it as a heating system in the home.
And how far behind? I mean, this wasn't at the time something that we had heard of or that we were particularly using in the UK. How far behind are we with other countries of a similar development, similar climate?
Yeah, well, I think it was quite easy to see why we were behind first, and that is that we had basically free gas, which was the runoff from the oil industry in the North Sea, and that was clearly made obvious to everybody in the 60s. So using free gas for many years and just paying really for the distribution of it was obvious why we didn't look at any alternate developing technologies in other countries. In the case of somewhere like Sweden, they had no fossil fuels, so they were driven down the direction of providing a system that was electrically driven, and with the knowledge of how much electricity costs to produce, that would end up being too expensive to deliver as a heating system by direct electric. So they needed to find an efficient way to use an electrically driven piece of equipment to gather heat from an area, and the heat pump technology was a development which I think has its basis in Oxford. In actual fact, there's some evidence that one of the colleges, I think it was New College in 1923, if I may be corrected on that, first put some pipework into the sewers of Oxford and used a refrigerator to develop some heating, and thereby produced a heat pump. And in fact, in the 50s, the festival hall was heated by a heat pump. So we'd seen that technology, but gas came along, and as it was cheap, that's the direction we went in.
And it was something that you felt so passionate about that you went to speak to ministers. In fact, David Cameron came down to visit you and to find out more about this work and how it would be possible to put it into action.
David Cameron arrived on the day after the consumer spending review that he'd announced to have a look at where we were going with renewable energy and confirm his allegiance to the various grant schemes that were in construction within the Department of Energy and Climate Change, and understand completely what heat pumps were, and got a very good and clear now understanding of the benefits of using heat pumps to our domestic economy and to the individual domestic user, specifically in rural locations where gas is not, and other even more expensive fuels like oil and LPG are widely used. And some of the savings can be as much as 70% if you're using a heat pump and you were previously using oil or LPG.
And I mean, the savings is the big thing that everyone is, hoping to be able to find at the moment. When it comes to using alternative sources, it was something that was brought to us on programmes like Grand Designs, and you would watch it and you'd think, wow, that's really clever. Obviously, it's really expensive because these guys are multimillionaires. And it's only about now that we're starting to see things like the solar panels just pop up on, relatively modest houses that you might see as you drive along the road. Are you noticing that it's becoming more mainstream?
Yes, in fact, we realised that the market was going to be somewhat limited if only those with large sums of money were able to go ahead with the product, and those people were necessary to be, if you like, the pioneers in the marketplace to prove the product works and spread that information across. But equally, during the last 5 or 6 years, we've had significant interest with the RSL business, the residential social landlord, housing associations and local authorities, to actually deliver solutions for them. And in fact, one of the local ones in West Oxford have 300 plus of these types of heating systems in. Some of the local housing associations we deal with have 600 and 700 installations, and in total we deal with something like 150 housing associations with various numbers of heat pumps in. So that's growing at quite a rapid rate, targeted at delivering a solution to fuel poverty in areas where people cannot afford to heat their home because the fuel costs are so high.
How expensive is it to consider putting in a whole new heating system? Because it does sound as though it's something that's going to be financially terrifying.
Yeah, when you actually look at it, the additional cost over and above, say, putting in a traditional system is probably, in an average 3-bedroom house, probably around £5,000. And what we'll talk about, I guess, in a moment is the government grants, the RHI, Renewable Heat Incentive as it's called, where that capital cost differential has been assessed by DEC, Department of Energy and Climate Change, to actually be repaid over a period of 7 years. So that means that the numbers work out that if you put a heat pump into a standard 3-bedroom semi-detached house, for example, and it were to cost £8,000 to £10,000, depending on what system it was that was going in there, and that would allow for a complete renewal of an existing heating system, then that cost would be repaid over a 7-year period.
And how does that get repaid? How does that work?
It's an index-linked, tax-free government grant deemed, assessed on the size of the property through what's called an EPC and Green Deal assessment. And
then once that that 7-year period is over and you have stopped paying back for the initial outlay, how much of a difference are people noticing on average in terms of their monthly or their quarterly fuel bills?
The savings are quite easy to work out because there's an efficiency of a heat pump, and then you make the calculation against the efficiencies of a boiler and the cost of the fuel, and those numbers are quite easy to calculate. But in general terms, the numbers you would expect to see on a like-for-like energy consumed would be 70% reduction from costs over oil and LPG at their normal standard pricing, and probably a 30% reduction from using gas at their current pricing levels. If we've actually, with one housing association called Saxon Weald, we have actually produced 2-bedroom houses with heat pumps and PV that are totally free to run. All their energy costs, including their cooking, their lighting, and their heating, all come from a renewable source, and their energy bills are zero. There is a number of cases. This is only a small sample, but we did that with them to prove that a simple capital expenditure up front and design criteria and good insulation with renewable energy solutions can give you that sort of circumstance.
And do you think eventually that's the way we will all turn and we will all be using zero cost?
Yeah, it seems to me good sense. If we have the technology to deliver zero cost energy homes, why don't we do it? It seems there's no reason I can possibly think of why we wouldn't do it. Therefore, we should have a vehicle, which is obviously a government grant, to enable the product to get to scale, to get the costs right in the marketplace, to make it more attractive and to spread the word so people understand and build trust. And then we can see major developments going forward, just like they are in Sweden and Scandinavia, where over 97% of homes are heated by this way.
Andrew Sheldon, thank you very much.